But we can move on probably to the next thing here, Kyle, and that involves the charter system once again. Spire has reportedly purchased a charter from StarCom Racing. And of course, Spire's been in the charter news basically this entire season. They sold two of
the entire last 5 seasons.
Yeah, they've previously this season sold 2 of their 3 charters to Colleague Racing for next season. So they still had that one for the 7 car, but now they're reportedly buying the second one. It's not confirmed by the teams or anything like that, but it's basically confirmed. I just want to preface that so that it's out there. But from Spire's point of view, they're going to have 2 charters now, at least for next season. Currently, we'll see what they do with this newly bought charter from StarCom, and if they decide to lease that to somebody else, that could be coming up. A GMS Racing, we think that the 2311 one is going to come from Front Row. So who's going to be out there maybe looking for a second charter? But if they decide to keep it, well, they have that 77 car that they could decide to run full time or some sort of part-time basis with the charter. So lots of different variables to go into play here. You wouldn't have thought maybe Spire would be in play for a charter for the second charter after selling 2 of them earlier this season. But hey, this is NASCAR silly season in 2021. Anything can happen. So what are your initial thoughts here, Kyle? This is an interesting play by Spire. Leaves a lot to be up in the air, at least for the short-term future here of what's going to happen with this second charter if they decide to keep it or lease it out.
Yeah, so just quickly, if they do keep the charter into next season and run it themselves, they have to run every single race. That's part of the charter agreement. So you can't run a chartered car part-time. So just wanted to clarify that one. But this is a fascinating one to me. It's not often you see a team sell 2 charters in an off season and then buy another one a couple of months later. It's very strange in this regard. So we knew at one point that Spire was looking to have 2 full-time drivers, and it looked like that was going to go away when they ended up selling the 2 charters to Colleague Racing. Is that plan now back buying this charter, or is this them continuing to play the charter game? We've seen them over the last handful of years kind of wheel and deal charters, buying them when they come available, leasing them out year over year, stuff like that. And so like this season, the charter that Trackhouse Racing is using is being leased being leased from Spire Motorsports. That was why Trackhouse, when Spire sold 2 of their charters, had to go out and buy 2 charters from somebody and ended up just buying out Chip Ganassi's NASCAR stuff because they needed 2 charters. And that was one that they kind of found a way to make available. So do I think that they'll run it? I think it's about 50-50, to be honest. I think they could go out and do kind of similar to what they've done this year, where they have LaJoie in the 1 car and or I guess in their first car, and then in the second car either have a rotation or go out and find another driver. The more likely scenario I see is they kind of snapped up the opportunity to get a StarCom with some of the relationship that they likely have with that fellow backmarker team that also runs same manufacturer, and go out and lease that to somebody else. And the one that I would look to is GMS Racing. You're talking about another Chevy team, a team looking to come into the Cup Series full-time next year if they can get that charter sealed up. Maybe not one to commit all the way to go out and purchase one fully themselves, because that might be a little bit too much to go out and do for GMS as it stands. But if Spire has control of it, they can then lease it for the 1 season, kind of get their feet wet, and then maybe look to buy it full time if they want to into the future, continue leasing, a bunch of different options from there. So I think that's most likely the scenario. I'd be a little bit surprised if we saw Spire run 2 cars next year, just given that they already kind of committed to running 1 car earlier this season when they sold 2 of their 3 charters. So I'm interested to see how this one goes, because this is a weird one. I didn't expect to see StarCom sell out or anything like that. I figured that they would stay, but I think they might see the writing on the wall with a lot of these charters being snapped up by better teams. And the rule that's in place in NASCAR right now is if you finish bottom 3 of the chartered cars for 3 straight seasons, NASCAR has the option to rescind your charter and basically wheel and deal it themselves. So might be seeing the rating on the wall. It wasn't something that they're at risk of this season. The only car that's at risk of that this season is the 51, and it's looking like that won't be a scenario. Remains to be seen. But to me, it's Spire taking advantage of an opportunity, jumping on something quickly, and continuing to play the charter game that kind of got them in the first place when they initially bought the Furniture Road charter.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know who they would be looking at for a second guy if they were to keep it as that second driver. There's a lot of different names out there that could potentially fill that spot. They've lost Justin Haley now to Colleague for next season, so they don't really have that 77 guy that they've relied on over the past couple of seasons at least. But there's some intriguing names that could potentially just want to stick their nose around in the Cup Series, remain here, or come up from the Xfinity Series or something like that could potentially stay in that spot. But lots of different variables to go along with Spire right now. And they're an intriguing team because we initially thought that they would try and go towards being more of a successful Cup Series team, try and be a mainstay. Then you thought with the Colleague news selling them earlier this season that they were maybe taking a step back from their previous stance, but now maybe they're reinvigorated and they feel like they are in a position to compete and try and maintain in that top 30 in points if they can do so with two cars next season. It's going to be an incredibly tight midfield battle with these kind of midfield teams adding a second car. We'll talk about another midfield team here in just a second, but Spire's fascinating. They're an intriguing team. You don't really have too many expectations from them, but they have a lot of interesting tidbits about them. Corey LaJoie is no slouch of a driver. He's very consistent. He gets the most out of that equipment for being a back marker team per se. And I'm intrigued to see what happens over the next couple of weeks here, couple of months, no matter how long it takes for them to decide what to do with the second charter, if they decide to keep it or if they decide to lease it out.
Yeah, I do think that they'll go the lease route. I would be a little bit surprised if they kept it themselves, just because selling it the two charters earlier this year, there was no guarantee they were getting that other one back. So you would assume that if they are planning to run that second charter themselves, that they're getting back in the game late, wouldn't have been in conversations with drivers because they would have already had Corey LaJoie locked up into next season. So I'd be a little surprised if that's the case, maybe continuing a colleague relationship or something like that, or maybe finding a place for somebody that's currently in the Xfinity series. But I think it's more likely that we see GMS kind of take that charter and see what they do with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know. It doesn't look like this junior motorsports team for a Cup team is going to be happening for 2022 at least. Year, no. So that's kind of out the window in terms of getting a charter for something like that. So if you're looking at the Chevrolet camp, most likely with GMS being a Chevy truck team, that makes a logical explanation for making a move like this in terms of getting it and then leasing it out, seeing what GMS can do in the Cup Series for next season, and then go from there if they want to scale back their operations or expand or buy it fully back from Spire. Who knows what's going to happen with that, but that seems like a 50-50 split right now. I'd probably lean towards the leasing side of things as well right now, because we don't know much about this GMS Cup Series team that they announced seems like ages ago.
Well, what we do know is that if they can secure a charter for next year, they're going to run full time. If not, they're going to do the colleague model and go part-time and kind of pick their races. That's what we know. So assuming that they can figure something out with Spire or they can get that charter, that seems like the most likely scenario to me.